A.
Good morning again.
Good morning. Hey, Sage, how are you?
Hi, everyone.
Hey. So I have not been able to prepare a lot for this meeting yet, just to let you all know. I've been back in the US for less than 24 hours, so kind of still trying to catch up.
No worries. This meeting is a little bit open, so a little bit open. It's a lot open to topics. We usually have some, but a little bit more free for all, and I kind of like that.
Okay, I just saw Gareth post the announcement in the community general channel, so let's give a couple more minutes to see if anybody else joins. Ooh, we have some new people.
Last time was such a hit.
I didn't get a chance to watch the last 10 minutes, so I'm excited to see what it is that you have planned.
It's really just silly and fun.
I like silly and fun.
We do too. You know, that it should happen a little more often.
Yeah, it humanizes us.
It does.
There is nothing silly about snails.
No, nothing silly. But I'm silly.
Same.
Humanizes us. I don't know how much snails are humans.
True. Yeah, so I imagine today we will talk about the Neon release and Stalebot, one of our favorite topics, and maybe even some new things. I know there was some chatter in pop build in that repo, and so there may be questions there. I don't see Tom. I may just ping him and see if he's available.
Yeah. And I think I should explain my whereabouts and why I've been kind of not the most responsive lately as well, to add to those who aren't in the loop.
Yeah, and then we'll open it up for anything else. Yeah, Cassandra, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So I have been gone for the past 2.5 weeks. I was given January 2019, I got the unique opportunity to be invited to submit a talk to a conference called Antarcticonf. It is part of a series, it was the first in a series of conferences that will eventually be kind of a bucket list conference series. And in this case, one of the goals was to arrange a conference where people who are kind of international regular conference speakers will get a chance to speak in Antarctica, as a chance to, a lot of people have a goal of speaking on all 7 continents. And so the organizers arrived on the best way to do a conference in Antarctica was to actually do it on a cruise ship that went through South America and Antarctica. And the days that we were in Antarctic waters, we did a conference session in the morning. We did kind of regular conference talks. Several were security talks, which was surprising. I didn't expect it to be such a security-heavy conference. We did talks on leadership, on front-end development practices, on design. One of the speaker's sons actually did a talk on creating video games. So a lot of different topics. And then in the afternoon, we were given the chance to have what were called mastermind sessions. And that was basically your chance to propose an unconference topic. And for those who aren't familiar with an unconference, it's basically everybody proposes things that they might like to talk about, have a guided hour-long discussion about, and people select which talks to go to. And so there were 9 unconference sessions every afternoon. And again, those raised on topics, everything from diversity to some communication things to a deep dive into password best practices. So a lot of different topics. As a result, because I was on a cruise ship and because I was in Antarctica, I didn't have the best internet accessibility. So I spent a lot of time talking to everybody else who was speaking at the conference, sharing ideas, comparing ideas. I chatted an awful lot with the community manager at Okta, with a security consultant, several other people, and kind of shared some ideas and some things that we can implement as a community running forward. So I had a little bit of a retreat feel, a little bit of a study abroad feel, and then of course just the amazing opportunity to cruise through Antarctica. We saw orcas and I got to take a helicopter tour to see rockhopper penguins, which are the ones with the little yellow feathers in their heads. Did some hiking and just really got a really unique opportunity that's left me, refreshed and excited and full of all sorts of ideas. So that's where I've been. I don't have any major travel coming up in the foreseeable future, so I should be a lot more available now. I'll probably be doing a couple blog posts, one about how we can all get more involved in the community, kind of some practical tips that you can have. And then I'll be doing a blog post as well on some of the lessons learned at Antarcticonf that I think can work in the future, and that we can apply kind of to the general community. So, and if anybody has questions about Antarcticonf or wants to chat about it more, feel free to bring those up now. You can DM me about them. Either way, I'm here. And I am thankful that, so I had signed up for the conference and paid for it out of pocket, but I was excited to have kind of SaltStack support as I went and did this off the wall little trip. That was awesome to have.
Oh, that's very cool.
Oh, and I did not successfully steal a penguin. My goal had been to steal a penguin. But the baby rockhoppers were already like 10 inches tall, so did not bring back a penguin.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
You got to see lots of cool stuff.
I did. It was incredible. Just places I didn't think I'd get to see, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like it was actually a really good networking opportunity too, and some ideas and stuff. I'll be excited to hear more about that as we dive into that.
Yeah, it was so inspiring to be around everybody. Out of the conference, I got invites to speak in Morocco and then more close to home at a OWASP conference in Denver called Snowfrock. So I'll probably be going out to Denver in early March to do a talk on how to build your career and then just get to know some of that security community.
Very cool. Very cool. Any questions for Cassandra? If not, we can move on to our latest and greatest favorite topic, which is Stalebot. I know we're all dying to talk about that. So Stalebot, we did, I think, Megan, you merged in some of those changes that we're just adding some more labels and looking for more comments to move forward with other changes. I know that this has been a hot topic and that there's been several tickets that have been opened, and we do want to hear from you guys. And so just going to open it up and give you guys a few minutes if people have comments, questions, I
have a suggestion.
Yeah.
I think we should stop calling it Stalebot and start calling it Snailbot.
I love it.
Come on, D-Waz, you know that salt and snails don't mix.
This is true. Yeah, we're hoping to look at more things going forward. One of the things that we want to look at is using the GitHub Actions and give us a little more leeway to do some more things and to make it better. That's not the end all be all, and that's certainly just one idea. We're open to some other ideas. We didn't want to configure our own Stalebot and then have to manage it. We were looking to use something else that's sort of pre-configured for us that we can just update to our liking. But of course, open to ideas and want to make that better. I am looking at some of those tickets and trying to make sure that, excuse me, that some that are still really valid are not staling out and getting closed. That's a big task for anybody, so or any one person. So I know that we're all trying to do that with our own tickets, and then I'm also trying to review and make sure that those aren't happening. I am not super successful there, but I at least am giving it a good solid try and trying to make sure that we're keeping it open, that you guys are telling us what you want.
Yeah, and kind of to reemphasize Sage's point, as we make these Stalebot changes, and I know we have upcoming some changes around documentation, some work groups and everything, all of this stuff is going to be flexible. It's going to be iterative. So something's not working, we want to be able to adapt and change and figure out what does and does not work, so that we are helping ensure that the community is productive, that y'all are getting the resources you need and the support that you need.
Maybe we'll call it Snailbot, although not appropriate because right now it's closing things quickly. I guess if it's, you know, the sloth version. I don't know.
What do you get when you mix a snail and a lion?
I don't know.
A very slow lion.
A very slow lion. We could do jokes now.
We do
Kinda
dad
lighten up
jokes.
the mood.
So I have an announcement. We've made the RC packages available. So anyone that wants to test the RC, go ahead and grab the packages. Repo.saltstack.com. And you might notice that the version on the package actually says 3000.0.0 RC. That's because we're still working out a few kinks in our versioning, but the official Neon package at the end of the month will be just Salt 3000. I think that covers the RC announcements.
Thanks to us. We'll just open it up. Are there any questions from the community? Anything you guys want to talk about? I know there was some chatter in pop build, so I went ahead and pinged Tom, and I think he got to all that. Any chance we can have a quick any chance we can have a quick update on version change? Sure. Do you guys want to tackle that?
Sure. So the driver for the versioning change is that we are fundamentally changing the way we actually do our development and the way we do our releases. So we're no longer maintaining older branches. We're focusing on a single branch called master. We've done away with the development branch, and we are shooting for a 4-month release cycle. So every 4 months we'll be doing a release. Whereas in prior years, we've been doing the date-based releases, but we also tend to be miss our mark on those releases by anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months. So with the changes we're making to the development process, in order to have predictable 4-month release cadence, we also decided that it would be a good time to move away from date-based versioning into sort of a more standard versioning. And this also just signifies that there's actually a change in the way we're doing our process.
Was there a reason for picking 3000 as opposed to, I think that Vince put in here?
Yeah, I mean, the reason for picking 3000 is so that it's going to be higher than any previous release version, right? So since we've been doing date-based versions, we're already up to 2019 as the major version. So we just decided to go to 3000 since it's a nice round number. It's definitely is a clear statement that it's no longer a date-based version. That sort of was the thinking behind that. How does this change, how long are older? So older releases are still supported, and we have a web page that shows our support lifetime for any release, which I can paste in the chat there. But we still will be supporting older releases. It's more about the method that we're taking to support those releases. We're not going to maintain branches that run for a very long time and are stick around for multiple years. If we need to make a patch, we're going to actually just branch off of the previous tag, make the changes we need to make, and then release those changes.
So in addition to that, we won't be backporting things from master into older branches or merging things forward into, as much as we did before, into master from older branches.
Right. The goal is to just, if we need to make a patch to an older release, we'll make the patch in master, and then we'll go ahead and also make a similar patch to the old version.
Yeah, great questions.
This also is going to help eliminate sort of the temptation to add in features to old releases, which historically they've crept in. People would add a feature in an older release that was really on maintenance for bug fixes and security fixes. So this is going to help with that as well.
So another question, the 2019 release was pretty rocky and we prefer to stay behind a bit. This means an older version won't get fixes. That's yes. We will maintain those tags, and we will, as Diwaz said, we will put fixes into them as they are applicable. But our goal in the long run is to make the releases more stable, released more often, more stable, so that people don't feel the need to stay behind as they have in the past. We recognize that and appreciate that, like, a lot of people have had to do that to maintain the stability, and that's one of the reasons why we're moving to this new way of doing things, to make sure that the master branch is always considered stable. In the past, like develop, as in most projects, develop is considered broken just because it's developed, but we want to move away from that and make sure that at any point we should be able to release and know that it is a good release going out.
Exactly, and that's part of the changes that we've made. One of the things that we've done is started being a lot more strict on requiring tests, especially for bug fixes. If someone writes a PR, makes changes that fix a bug, we're requiring a regression test for that. And for any substantial new features that are coming in, or even just things that are touching the core of Salt, like if it's going to touch the file module, you're going to be asked to write tests for it.
And another thing that we're trying to get better at, like we've had mentioned already, is cutting release candidates. So we'll be packaging up Salt so that you can test it in your environment earlier rather than later, so you can catch bugs and issues that apply to you, and then we can get those fixed before we actually cut a new release of Salt. So that should help stabilize things also quite a bit.
Yeah, this go around, since it's the first time on our 4-month release cadence, which we do expect to hit and have a release at the end of this month or beginning of next month. It was a little bit rocky, so our RC did not get out as quickly as we wanted, but it is out now. So you've got a week still to test and look for any bugs. We've got a week to test and look for any bugs. But in the future, that should be more like 2.5 weeks.
So we had a couple more questions. One surrounding SaltBin. It looks like SaltBin only packages 2019.2.2. I would imagine that's just because SaltBin is still under active development, and we're not officially using it for packages yet. I would imagine there will be a 2019.2.3 or even a Neon package, and it looks like Tom's on here, so he could probably address that.
Let me cover that. The SaltBin repo is not really it's not something that should be exposed. I mean, that's very experimental at this point on repo.saltstack.com. As we move forward, we are going to make that repo more public as we have newer releases that are actually put into it. But at this point, the plan has been that we begin building salt bins on a more regular basis for Neon, and that those are more tightly integrated into Heist. But yeah, I mean, those binaries up there are what I would argue to be pretty experimental at this point. Now, the build process itself is undergoing a lot of testing, as we would really like to see more use of SaltBin overall.
So the next question was, sorry for the barrage of questions surrounding this. No worries, more questions the better. This means that the security fixes and feature updates will stay together, so there will be no mechanism to do a security-only updates. If we get a report of a CVE or a security issue, as Dewa said, we will branch off older supported RCs, or sorry, tags of older releases, and apply those security fixes to those older releases. But we won't be doing feature development in older releases.
Yes, so to be clear, there is a mechanism to patch for security only updates. And actually in our last, we had a recent CVE that we made release for it, and we released a 2018.3.5 package and a 2019.2.3 package. And the only thing in those packages were the fix for the security and the test to verify the fix for the security issue. So moving forward, we're still going to do that the same way, where when we need to do a security patch, you will have a package that only includes the patch for that security, and it'll be tested. The next one is primary SaltStack repo includes non-supported packages. Is there anything prohibiting pushing older ones? I'm not quite sure I understand. William, if you can clarify your question just a little bit more, that would help. Or feel free to speak. You know, we get a lot of these questions coming in over the chat, and I don't know if that's because people feel they're not allowed to speak, but definitely this is a forum where anyone can speak up at any time.
Yeah, so the last open air thing, whatever, Tom mentioned that he wants people to push their versions out there, and he wanted them to push, you know, kind of what they wanted. But would it be, if you don't support something, would it be adding support to, say, 216.3 to SaltBin? Is that against your current policy because it's a new project and you kind of don't want to do that?
Sorry, are you asking, would we be interested in applying SaltBin to outdated releases that we are no longer maintaining?
Yes, that's correct.
I don't think it would make a whole lot of sense from a SaltStack perspective to push SaltBin to significantly older versions, unless I mean there's a really specific need, but I don't see any problem with somebody trying to make that happen. I mean, it's also worth saying that the SaltBin system makes a number of assumptions about at least being executed on Python 3, I haven't done any tests on Python 2 with SaltBin. Everything I've done is, again, assuming a full Python 3 stack. If you're going to be looking at older versions, that's the main hiccup that I would expect. Yeah, but I mean, if you have a real serious need to build a binary for an old version, go ahead. But that is not currently in the plan, that we would create SaltBin versions of significantly older versions of Salt.
And Tom, do you recall when we started supporting Python 3, what version that was in?
I don't. I mean, I think that we had initial attempts at supporting Python 3 back in 2016, but I wouldn't say that we had really robust support for Python 3 until early 2018. And even then there were hiccups.
Yeah, I definitely know that 2018 3.4 and 3.5, which is security release, those are pretty solid on Python 3, from what I know.
Right, those were the releases that we felt had really crossed the chasm, so to speak, on Python 3. But there were still a few issues that we were navigating. But they were mostly peripheral.
Does that cover your question there, William?
Yes, it's helpful.
I mean, I guess the question is what motivation do you have for us to start building SaltBin against significantly older versions?
I mean, my motivation is that we're stuck on an older version and we're trying to get to newer versions, but we're stuck on a version that doesn't have a lot of the great features and support that these newer ones have. And we're trying to find a way to get there a little easier. We're also relying on Python 2.7 for a lot of stuff. And so we can't get something too new because our early testing of the new hotness shows that there's conflicts with Python 2.7.
So when you talk about conflicts with 2.7, are these some of your own execution modules?
No, this is just, it's honestly, it's just how like a bunch of it is just how the states have been written and how different arguments have been added or different arguments have been removed. And so it's a bunch of effort to get there. And we don't really have a consistent way of going from one to the next. So we were looking at SaltBin because it seems like a pretty, great thing just to have a single binary you can put on a machine. But we don't want to invest into that if it's something that's not going to suit our needs.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. And we've got a few, I mean, there are a few deployments out there in your situation, which is also one of the reasons why more recently I've been very aggressively putting my foot down that if somebody submits code that breaks people's existing states, that should not be accepted, because we don't want people to be in the situation that you're in. Frankly, I think it's one of the worst things that we've done is allowing states to be broken. And so
partly
yeah.
one of the benefits of this SaltBin is that really a lot of our testing is done through Salt SSH, and things don't always work with Salt SSH that they work using Salt.
Oh yeah.
And so the high portion looks really fabulous to us. We're just not sure, if it's going to work at our point. It doesn't seem to be it doesn't seem like there's an easy way to get from 16.3 all the way up there. And when we, we currently don't have any tests, we don't have, it's we're trying to add all this stuff without breaking things. And we're just, we're looking at some of the things that you have is like, oh, you have these fancy shiny toys in the future. So we're hoping to get there.
Okay, no, and that makes a lot of sense. I certainly, and I've, okay, and I saw you on the pop build repo. One of the challenges that we do have moving forward is that we just don't have pop build and SaltBin working on Windows yet, which seemed to be one of your concerns. That's one of the focuses that I really want to double down on for the Sodium release. Honestly, I'm not sure what the hiccup is.
Yep. Windows isn't a concern for us. I just wanted
okay.
to. I originally just added that because I was on the Windows machine at the time, and I was just confirming that it wasn't just him.
Okay. Oh yeah, and the hopefully I pushed an update to pop build. Hopefully that resolves that issue. If not, I mean, I need to go and check those issues again to see if any more have come in. It did? Okay, excellent. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, I'd be curious what happens if we run pop build again and try and make a SaltBin out of 2016.3, because I mean, it's one of those where it might work. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm kind of shooting in the dark here, because how do I put this? I mean, my goal in designing the system was that it would just kind of work with arbitrary Python code bases. As long as you run pop build from a Python 3 interpreter, you can use pyenv and target 2.7 for the actual artifact. It should work. So, I mean, if you're trying to build something against Python 2, as long as you're not asking for us to support Python 2 as an interpreter language for pop build, but only as a target project, I think those are definitely bugs and issues that are worth looking into. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm perfectly happy to work towards making pop build a system which can support a Python 2 project, so long as it's supported by PyInstaller.
And I don't really want to make it support Python 2 project. I'm in the boat that we want to get on something higher, and I'm trying to push having pyenv be used, or at least available on any machine so that they can do that. And if Salt Build has the ability to include, I think it includes the Python executable in it, right?
Yes, it does.
And so I like that.
Because we really want to be able to deploy Salt in such a way that we don't care what version of Python's on the system, and we don't want to. And we want to. I'd really like to just eliminate the class of bugs wherein we have dependency collisions with System Python and other people using System Python.
Is there one of the things I wasn't very clear about Salt Build is the goal to have it so that you get a single binary for a single version that works on, say, Red Hat and Ubuntu and also Windows? Or are you trying to do different ones for each?
It should work on the various Linuxes, but Windows would be a different binary, of course.
Yeah, Windows would need to be a different binary, right? Because they have a different binary encoding. The goal, how do I put this? From a larger scale distribution perspective, my thinking at this point is that we would build the binary for Ubuntu version X on Ubuntu version X. But at the same time, we certainly have observed that if the binary is built against an older glibc, that forward compatibility seems to work. But with that said, so I mean, that is a goal. With that said, there are a number of hiccups that we run into when we're looking at Linux forward compatibility, and we still need to rely on the existing glibc. Again, there are a couple other things that we can do to get around that problem. But for instance, as you're looking at the repo.saltstack.com with saltbin/Linux, those packages are built on 64-bit CentOS 6 with the intention that they will run mostly reliably on newer systems. And in preliminary tests, they have, although they tend to throw some encoding errors that don't seem to have any real bearing on the actual execution. That actually seems related to a PyInstaller bug. That is one of those things that I really want to get back to looking at. But so it's a little both. That if we're going through the trouble of making a package for a targeted system that contains a salt bin, heavens, we should build it on that target system. I mean, that's just good hygiene. But with that said, we want to be able to use projects like Heist to be able to deploy a single binary to multiple Linux systems. But again, if it's a Windows system, there's no reasonable way to create a binary which is going to run on Linux, Windows, and Mac.
I don't want to take too much time because there's a lot of other questions, but I thank you for going into detail about that.
Oh, you bet, and thanks for your interest, comments, and assistance on that pup build issue. A lot of these newer projects are. I feel like I'm trying to get a lot out the door at once, which is a lot of the challenges that we're facing. So no, thank you. And let me actually catch up with a few of these other questions. So I will cede the stage to someone who's read another question.
Okay, so the next one was, sorry if this has been brought up and I missed a few meetings. I'm wondering about the philosophical vision of SALT pillars, formulas, and the documentation. Formulas and the documentation tend to focus on a way of using SALT with pillars and various tools, but the conversation on Slack/IRC and other places tend to talk about moving away from formulas and pillars for better performance and scalability. Is the roadmaps and working groups looking to address these differences in SALT usage, models, and designs?
So I'm not totally sure where the moving away from formulas would affect performance and scalability. I could see why someone would say to limit the use of pillars to things that are absolutely necessary and limit the targeting of those pillars to the minions that absolutely need them. And that's simply because pillars get pushed down to minions as they're needed. And that, if you have a lot of pillar data, that can slow things down, just rendering them every time.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about a lot of the formulas, there's some really good ones that are maintained by the community, but a lot of them are designed to be very generic, and so they pull a lot of stuff from Pillar to make them as generic as possible. And so as Diwaz was saying, like the more Pillar information you have to pull down, the slower states are going to run, particularly with formulas. So I think a good rule of thumb is probably just to make them like a basis for what you end up using. rather than like if you start to see some kind of slowdowns, make them like kind of like go in and remove additional things that you don't need, and kind of tailor them more towards what your environment looks like.
Yeah, and to that point, you could also potentially make a contribution to the formula for improvements, or think of ways that you could limit the use of pillar data in those formulas and try to submit that to the upstream repo. I feel like, well, Sean, you could just let us know if that answers your question or not.
I can jump on the next one. Vince is asking if some of these new projects are going to make it easier to update and upgrade Salt minions in line, and then he references that other programs support upgrading themselves. One of the challenges, we've had a lot of challenges with Salt updating itself, primarily because of the level of integration that it tends to have on the target systems, and the fact that historically we've supported so many different mechanisms of updating. So for instance, if you have installed pip via operating system packages, pip's internal update system will not reliably update itself. And so we run into similar issues with just the diversity of ways in which Salt can be updated. Now, you can, of course, have some states and some executions that can update the Salt RPM or Debian package. But again, it's very difficult for us to make a completely unified approach here. Now, with Salt bin, a lot of that goal is to say that the update mechanism can be much smoother. Because in that case, it becomes, we're just swapping out a file. And swapping out a file, or even if it's an isolated collection of files, then that self-updating can be fundamentally abstracted away from the system's own upgrade path. So yes, it is definitely something that we would like to see, and something that we're moving towards with Salt bin, to be able to say that those upgrades are a lot smoother. Let's see, and William also asked, is there a planned use case for running heist against a minion that is already attached to another master? You're welcome, Vin. Sorry, I should have asked if that answered your question. Okay, excellent. So let's see, moving over to William Montgomery's, is there a planned case for running heist against a minion that is already attached to another master, i.e., yeah, host 1 run heist on host 3 to target host 2. So yeah, so right now the two primary use cases of heist are to use it for the reverse network tunnel, as well as using heist to bootstrap a minion to an arbitrary master. Now, it would make, as you were saying, a lot of sense to be able to say something like, let's hit a system and allow it to install a heist minion which supersedes an existing install of Salt. That honestly shouldn't be a terribly difficult add. Effectively, all we need to do, and Megan could interject if she feels that if I misrepresent something in this pipeline. As again, trying to remember all the code that I've put together over the years. Really, all we need to do is extend heist to be able to have a flag that says, "Hey, if there is a current running minion on that system, go ahead and shut that minion down." Heist in and of itself should not manage the installation of said minion. That would be for the new minion, which would be deployed by heist to be able to do things like say, hey, explicitly remove any old minion that might be on the system using your standard mechanisms inside of Salt to do so, while still preserving that heist minion. Or it would make sense for heist to also potentially allow the deployment of these minions through packages, so that we would potentially be able to hit that system and say, hey, we're going to run the equivalent of kind of a heist bootstrap that will install a long-lived minion instead of a more ephemeral minion like we do with heist. Might be another option. But the primary one, I think, makes the most sense and wouldn't be a difficult add, really, just a flag that says, hey, if system D is on this system, or another init runtime, do a quick check. If a Salt minion is running, go ahead and shut that sucker down. I think, again, would be perfectly reasonable. And actually, that could be done entirely through the Salt bin that's deployed, now that I'm thinking about it. It would be perfectly reasonable to deploy a Salt bin, and then actually execute Salt call -- local and service.dead Salt minion before firing up the dedicated minion in and of itself. So a number of options as to how we could address that. But yeah, shouldn't be too terribly difficult. With that said, however we would want to address that, we'd want to make it as simplistic as possible. I would like to avoid having a massive number of deployment options moving forward. It would be really nice if we could try and consolidate these so that we can address Vince's concern in a cleaner way, so that we can have a more unified way to update things moving forward. It's interesting. On one hand, many of Salt's benefits are its massive amounts of flexibility. On the other hand, as we move forward, I would really like to batten down the hatches on a few interfaces, so that certain aspects of maintainability are less flexible, so that we can hopefully just make these problems go away, because we run into our flexibility having spawned a few of these trouble areas as well.
The only thing I would add to that approach, or question I have, is how would we approach the management of keys? Do we just assume the person would need to delete the key for the old minion that heist is taking over? Or is heist copying those keys to its temp directory possibly?
That's a really good question, and it opens up a number, quite a few questions about a few security questions that I would rather do a little research on before I give a finite answer there.
Sure.
Having the ability for heist to maintain the minion and master keys for the new instance of that minion, or to be able to migrate the config even, I'll just say those are worthy considerations that we should keep in mind. But at the same time, I would say let's not be too hasty in making promises before it's been investigated. But those are definitely strong considerations. Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, let's put that on the agenda for either next time or Salt office hours, and give you some time to research that, you guys. Great questions, by the way. This has been phenomenal. We are getting close to wrapping up. Is there anything else that people had questions about? We want to make sure that we're giving you guys ample time and space to ask questions.
Someone has to ask a question so we can run out the clock. Avoid the snail jokes.
But I love the snail jokes.
Yeah, no, I'm actually going to have to go with Garrett here. I think.
Well, I posted some Salt jokes.
If we slow down, then we can avoid snail jokes.
And yet not. Odd.
Well, if no one's got any other questions.
Oh, I've got questions, Diwaz. Unless, I mean, if you've got a snail joke, then I've got questions. They can be totally abstract questions.
That's Diwaz's secret. He always has a snail joke.
Yes, I just
Yeah,
made this
yeah.
one up.
You always have a snail joke.
What do you call a snail in a bowl of salt?
Dead.
Ragnarok.
I don't know what.
It's a dead snail.
Dead. All right. Oh, man.
No, my only question is, does anyone have any opinions on the differences between distributed hash table algorithms?
As in what? Like, I'm kind of wondering where, like, what's the application?
Oh, I'm just working on a distributed computing problem. Mostly a local area network, so no edge computing, and want to be able to satisfy the needs of distributed hash tables and consensus, which in and of itself is a tricky situation. And I'm debating between something more classic, which would be a combination of something like Chord with blocks of Raft, or to try and do something a little more crazy by doing something with holochain.
Yeah, I mean, my take is Paxos on all that, but that's just me, so I'm kind of crazy.
Oh, really? Really? You'd go for Paxos?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you'd go for Paxos, that pushes me actually towards using a system called Plenum, which is it's a Paxos-derived Byzantine fault-tolerant system. Yeah, Vince is asking, do not Redis or etcd have kind of solved this already? They definitely do. Certainly, don't get me wrong. This is a side project that I'm just playing around with. Everybody's got to have some fun. We'll see if it bears fruit. Right, Saltbin was a side project. Heist was a side project that bore fruit. I've done many others that have not.
And some people tell smell jokes.
Well, I also would love to have time to work on a distributed system side project. That's fun.
Well, I might talk to you offline then, Diwaz. Another question that William Montgomery just popped in that I'll handle real quickly. Right now, the SaltBin creates a binary that appears to have Salt CLI, API, Syndic, etc. When you mentioned variations of binaries, what are some of these profiles that you are considering? When it comes to variations on the SaltBin binary, it really, in my mind, has to do with what dependencies are bundled with the binary. So if we are building a binary that intends to interact with Red Hat systems exclusively, for instance, then we would probably add a number of dependencies to said binary. And that's one of the things that I want to do in the SaltBin repository, is build out some configurations for building against targeted operating systems so that we can have kind of a richer experience on those specific operating systems. As well as use cases around things like network device management. One of the challenges that we run into with network device management is that managing network devices tends to come with a rather large set of dependencies. And it would make a lot of sense to have a SaltBin binary that might be terribly large, but is more targeted towards that network use case. As if you bring in all of these network management dependencies that are used by SALT to address this particular use case, it can get a bit larger, and it wouldn't make sense to have those inside of that default binary that you're deploying. Similarly, we could have SALT bin binaries that could be even more thoroughly stripped down to have even fewer components directly inside of SALT to create, say, IoT binaries. Does that answer your question, William? I'll assume it does. I'll take silence for a yes, Tom. Well played. Thank you. But yes, experimentation is crucial to progress. There's, for those of you who don't know, I'll consume the last 60 seconds by just saying that one of my lifelong dreams is to create a distributed operating system, and not one like Kubernetes that says it's distributed by passing operating systems around. I think that that's kind of interesting and silly from a theoretical perspective. When I say silly, I do not want to detract from the obvious usefulness of the Kubernetes platform. Yeah, as I look at the ideas of making a distributed operating system, it would mandate certain levels of pluggable layering of distributed computation, which would mandate some very different approaches to handling distributed metadata that are not generally addressed by just popping in a Redis or an etcd, right? So it's one of my long-term theoretical goals in life. We'll see if that ever comes to fruition.
I'm sure you've looked into the DAT project and some of those other, I guess they're more for distributed data, but
Did you say DASK, D-A-S-K?
DAT.
Oh, there's also DASK, DASK, which is a Python one. Yeah. It's pretty amazing, actually. The concepts in that are phenomenal.
What that one is, I've seen it at some point, but yeah, the DAT protocol is kind of interesting because they use distributed hash tables and seeding like BitTorrent style things to like distribute lots of data in an offline, gracefully offline world, I guess. And then there's a web browser called Beaker that's built on top of this protocol, so you can actually like basically host your own web pages, but in a BitTorrent-esque fashion. It was very interesting. But some of the principles, at least, would be ones that you would have to solve or apply to a distributed operating system for sure.
Oh yeah, no, I opened up Dask and this looks very promising. There's just so many ways to skin this cat. And I feel like I've solved a lot of the fundamental problems. So part of my thinking around POP is actually like POP solves a lot of the problems that I'm trying to address right now, but it is still kind of part of this big picture goal that I have of creating a distributed operating system. So yeah, we'll see if I ever get there. It's my equivalent to Einstein destroying the remainder of his career trying to make establish the grand unified theorem. Okay, I think that does it then. We have diverged heavily.
Thanks everyone for joining. I will.
No joke. Just letting you guys know. If anyone wants one, just say the word.
We had some. I will post this to YouTube and make sure that everybody has the links once it's available. I'll try to make it available by the end of the week. Hopefully I have enough time, and thank you everybody for joining.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.